I was 6,000 miles from Chicago, standing in a black site in Yemen, when my satellite phone vibrated against my plate carrier. It wasn't command. It was a civilian notification. I looked down. One message from Mercy General Hospital. Your daughter is in critical condition. Accidental fall. Then, 3 seconds later, a text from my ex-husband, Ryan. Don't come back. We are handling the press. I stared at the glowing screen. He wasn't worried about our daughter dying. He was worried about his Senate campaign dying. Panic is a luxury for civilians. I don't have that luxury. I simply turned to my second-in-command and said, "Cut him loose. We are leaving. The mission is over. The war just moved home." Before we descend into this storm, drop a comment with where you're watching from and the current time. I want to see how far this story travels. Protocol says you debrief for 24 hours after a high-value extraction. I didn't have 24 hours. I barely had 24 minutes. I cashed in a favor with a joint operations pilot and was wheels up on a cargo transport before the dust had even settled back onto the Yemeni desert. The bay of the C-17 was cold, loud, and smelled of hydraulic fluid and ozone. It was a smell that usually calmed me. It meant the job was done. It meant I was safe. But today, the roar of the engines sounded like a countdown. I sat strapped into the jump seat, my knees pressed against my chest, vibrating with the thrust of the aircraft. Grief tried to breach the perimeter, but I choked it out. Tears compromised visual acuity, and I needed to be sharp. I closed my eyes and forced my heart rate down. 100, 80, 60. I engaged what we call tactical dissociation. It is a survival mechanism. You take the part of you that feels fear, the part of you that is screaming, and you lock it in a mental box. You don't ignore the emotion, you just store it for later processing. Right now, Jordan the mother wanted to scream until her throat bled, but Jordan the asset needed to analyze the data. I pulled my phone out again. The screen was cracked, dust worked into the fissures. I reread the message from the hospital. Critical condition. Accidental fall. Then I reread Ryan's text. We are handling the press. The data didn't align. I ran the physics in my head. A 7-year-old girl is resilient. Their bones are pliable. A fall from a standing height, or even a playground structure, rarely results in a critical designation unless there is a severe head strike. But critical usually implies internal bleeding, organ damage, or compound trauma. That requires force, velocity, intent. Ryan wasn't telling me she was hurt. He was telling me a story. And the fact that his first instinct was to mention the press, to mention handling the narrative, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. This was a liability he was trying to erase. I looked at the photo of Mia I kept in my tactical pouch. It was taken 6 months ago, the last time I was stateside. She was smiling, missing a front tooth, holding a stuffed rabbit I'd sent her from Germany. I had missed that tooth falling out. I had missed her first day of 2nd grade. I had missed them because I was deployed, earning the hazard pay that funded Ryan's Senate campaign, that paid for the sprawling house in the suburbs, that covered the tuition for the private school where he loved to be photographed picking her up. I had been the shadow sentinel in their perfect life. I stayed in the dark so they could shine in the light. And in return, I asked for one thing. One single return on my investment. Keep her safe. They had defaulted on the contract. The pilot's voice crackled over the headset, announcing our descent into O'Hare. 7,800 miles in a metal tube, and I hadn't slept for a second of it. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. It replaced the panic. It replaced the fear. The wheels touched down, the tires shrieking against the tarmac as the massive plane fought to stop. The sound matched the screeching halt of my former life. The woman who left here 6 months ago, the provider, the distant protector, the ex-wife who played nice for the sake of politics, she didn't come back on this plane. I unbuckled the harness and grabbed my pack. No suitcase. No civilian clothes. Just my gear and the documents I needed to strip people of power. I walked down the ramp into the humid Chicago night. I wasn't walking into a hospital to hold a hand and weep. I was walking in to conduct an audit. and when I found the discrepancy, I was going to liquidate the account. The sliding glass doors of Mercy General didn't make a sound as they parted. I walked past the triage desk, ignoring the security guard who started to stand up, then sat back down when he saw the look in my eyes. I didn't need to ask for a room number. I knew exactly where they would be. Ryan wouldn't settle for the pediatric ICU. That was too public, too chaotic, too full of real people with real problems that might bleed into his photo op. He would have demanded the quiet wing on the 4th floor, the donor wing, the wing my checks helped build. I took the elevator up, the silence ringing in my ears. When the doors opened, the air smelled different, less like bleach and fear, more like expensive flowers and floor wax. I turned the corner and stopped. I was 30 feet away, standing in the shadow of a large linen cart. They were clustered outside room 412. It didn't look like a family vigil. It looked like a campaign strategy meeting. Ryan was there, standing near the nurse's station. He was still wearing his navy blue suit, the expensive Italian cut we bought for his Senate announcement speech. He wasn't pacing in distress. He was rehearsing. I watched him run a hand through his hair, messing it up just enough to look distraught but not unkempt. He practiced the slump of his shoulders, leaning against the counter, then checking his reflection in the glass partition. He was calibrating his grief. He wanted to look broken, but capable. The grieving father who would still show up to vote. It was a performance, and then there was Ashley, my replacement. She was sitting on a bench a few feet away, holding a compact mirror. She wasn't crying. She was checking her eyeliner. She dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue, ensuring the mascara hadn't run, ensuring she looked tragic but photogenic. A tear-stained face pulls well. A messy face does not. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, a modest black number she definitely hadn't been wearing when the accident happened. She was in costume. I stood there, motionless, letting the rage clarify into target acquisition data. For 7 years, I had been the silent partner in this corporation. When I deployed to Syria, the hazard bonus paid off the mortgage on the colonial house in Evanston. When I took the private security contract in Venezuela, the signing bonus covered the tuition at St. Jude's. I disappeared into the dark so they could live in the light. I accepted the label of absentee mother because I believed the lie that my absence purchased her safety. I believed that my money built a wall around my daughter that nothing could penetrate. I looked at Ryan's polished shoes. I looked at Ashley's fresh manicure. Everything they had, the clothes, the status, the comfort, was funded by my blood and my time. I had outsourced the care of my daughter to them. I treated them like high-end contractors. I paid a premium for security, and they had failed the contract. The guilt that had plagued me on the plane, the nagging voice saying I should have been there, vanished. It was replaced by the cold, metallic taste of betrayal. They weren't grieving a tragedy. They were managing a public relations crisis, and they had no idea that the crisis manager had just walked into the building. I adjusted the strap of my tactical pack, took a deep breath of the filtered air, and stepped out of the shadows. The masquerade was over. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open with a steady hand and stepped into the room. The air inside was stifling, thick with the scent of lilies, the funeral flower. Someone was already planning ahead. The room froze. Ryan spun around from the window, his worried father mask slipping for a split second before he tried to pin it back in place. Ashley snapped her compact shut, the sharp click echoing like a gunshot. "Jordan," Ryan said. His voice was too loud, too performative. "I told you not to come. The press is downstairs. It's a zoo. We don't need you making a scene." He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at my boots, my cargo pants, the dust of a Yemeni airfield still clinging to my jacket. To him, I looked like a liability, like trash he'd forgotten to take out. Ashley stood up, smoothing her dress. She didn't look at me with sympathy. She looked at me with the predatory gaze of someone who smells blood. She walked closer, invading my personal space, lowering her voice to a whisper that was meant to be intimate but felt like a blade. "You're late," she hissed. A toxic smile ghosted across her lips. Again. Always the soldier, never the mother. But don't worry, Jordan. She calls me Mom in the ambulance. It was bait. A perfectly crafted emotional shiv designed to make me scream, to make me lunge at her. If I attacked her, I was the unhinged ex-wife. She was the victim. She wins. My pulse didn't even skip. I engaged the Grey Rock Protocol. In interrogation training, they teach you that if you give the enemy nothing, no emotion, no reaction, no surface to grab onto, they eventually exhaust themselves trying to find a crack. You become a Grey Rock. Boring, unyielding, impenetrable. I looked past her shoulder, fixing my gaze on the wall, then slowly brought my eyes to her face. I didn't see a rival. I saw a subject. Your pupils are dilated to 6 millimeters, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of anger. A statement of fact. Ashley blinked, her smile faltering. Excuse me? Your respiration rate is 24 breaths per minute. Shallow, rapid. I took a step closer, not aggressively, but with clinical curiosity. And you're covering your jugular notch. Her hand flew to her throat, covering the hollow at the base of her neck. It is a primal defensive instinct. The body tries to protect its most vulnerable point when the brain knows it is in danger. When the brain is lying. What are you talking about? You're crazy, she stammered, taking a step back. Her confidence was cracking. She expected a screaming match. She didn't know how to fight a mirror. You're terrified, I continued, monotone. The adrenaline spike isn't grief, it's fear. You're waiting for the blowback. Jordan, stop it! Ryan stepped between us, puffing out his chest. She's been here all night. She's the one who found her. You have no right to come in here and psychoanalyze my wife while my poll numbers are tanking because of this. He stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. He realized what he said a second too late. Poll numbers. I looked at him. I didn't look at him with hatred. I looked at him the way a coroner looks at a cadaver. Poll numbers, I repeated. That's not what I meant, he backpedaled, sweat beading on his upper lip. I meant the stress, the scrutiny. Clear the room, I said. I didn't shout. You can't order us out, Ashley snapped, trying to regain ground. We're family. You are suspects, I corrected. Get out. For a second, I thought Ryan would argue. But he looked into my eyes that had seen things in the last 48 hours that would make him wet his tailored suit, and he saw something that terrified him. He saw that the bank was closed. The silent partner was speaking. He grabbed Ashley's arm. They retreated. Not like family leaving a bedside, but like guilty children escaping a crime scene. As the door clicked shut, the heavy, suffocating energy in the room lifted. I was alone with the silence. And for the first time, I turned to the small, still figure in the bed. I barely had 30 seconds of silence before the door opened again. This time, it wasn't family. It was security. 2 guards, thick-necked and wearing uniforms that were a little too tight, stepped in. They weren't the regular hospital staff. Private contractors. Ryan's brother, Brandon the district attorney, had likely made a call. Ma'am, the lead guard said, his hand resting casually near his belt. We've been instructed to remove you. You're causing a disturbance. I didn't argue. I didn't resist. In a tactical environment, you don't fight a battle where the terrain is controlled by the enemy. You retreat, regroup, and find a new angle of attack. Moving past them without a word, I let my silence unnerve them. Their confusion was palpable. They expected a hysterical mother, screaming and clinging to the bed rails. Instead, they got a ghost. The corridor stretched out before me, feeling longer than it had 5 minutes ago. I felt their eyes on my back until I rounded the corner near the nurse's station. That's when I saw her, the nurse from the night shift, the one who had been in the room when I arrived, checking the monitors with a gentleness that didn't match the sterility of the VIP wing. She was standing in a blind spot, near the linen closet, looking at me. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. I moved toward her. She didn't speak, just handed me a tablet she had tucked under a clipboard. On the screen was a digital chart. Not the sanitized version Ryan would show the press. The raw intake notes. "They're scrubbing the logs," she whispered, pretending to check a supply list. The attending physician changed the cause of injury code 10 minutes ago, from non-accidental trauma to domestic fall. Non-accidental trauma, the medical euphemism for abuse. "Can you get me access to the patient?" I asked. She shook her head. "There's a cop outside the door now." "But," she hesitated, then pulled a small, sealed biohazard bag from her pocket. Inside was a pediatric wristband, cut off during intake. I saw the bruises on her wrist. "They aren't scrapes, Jordan. They're fingerprints. Adult fingerprints. Someone grabbed her, hard, and twisted." I felt the cold rage surge again, but I pushed it down into the box. Rage doesn't win court cases. Evidence does. "I need to document it," I said. "Not on a phone. Not on paper." I pulled out my secure comms device. It wasn't an iPhone. It was standard issue field tech, encrypted to a military standard. I opened an application designed for documenting war crimes in conflict zones. We call it the Evidence Fortress. "I can't get you back in," the nurse whispered. "I don't need to get back in," I said. I handed her the device. "Take a picture of the bruises on her wrist. Use this app. It doesn't just take a photo. It embeds the GPS coordinates, the timestamp to the millisecond, and hashes the file into a blockchain ledger instantly. Once it's uploaded, it exists on 1,000 servers at once. Ryan can bribe a doctor to change a chart. Brandon can order a cop to lose a file. But they can't delete a block from the chain. If it's on the cloud with a hash key, it's immortal." She looked at the device, then at me. Her hands were trembling slightly. "If they catch me, they won't," I said. "Because you're angry too. I saw it in your eyes." She took the device and slipped it into her pocket. "Wait by the vending machines on the 3rd floor." 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Notification: upload complete. Secure hash generated. I opened the file. The image was high definition, brutal in its clarity. 4 dark purple contusions on a small, pale wrist. The shape of a hand, a large hand, an angry hand. It wasn't just an injury anymore. It was data. It was a forensic fact that no amount of spin, money, or political influence could erase. I had the ledger. Now I just needed to balance the books. I retreated to the parking garage. It was a tactical withdrawal, not a defeat. The hospital air was too recycled, too full of eyes and cameras owned by the wrong people. I needed the cold, concrete anonymity of the lower levels to think. Leaning against a pillar in the far corner of Zone C, the smell of exhaust and damp concrete filling my lungs, I checked the upload status. The blockchain verification was green. The evidence of abuse was secure. But abuse is a state crime. It is messy. It is a he said, she said battle that drags on in family court for years, while Ryan's high-priced lawyers bury me in motions. I didn't want a custody battle. I wanted a demolition. Headlights swept across the wall, blinding me for a second. A black sedan rolled slowly down the ramp, the engine purring with expensive silence. It didn't look like a police cruiser. It looked like a cleanup crew. I tensed, my hand drifting to the tactical pen in my pocket, a harmless writing implement to a civilian, a piercing weapon to anyone else. The car stopped 10 feet away. The window rolled down. I expected a hitman. I expected Brandon, the corrupt D.A. Instead, I saw silver hair and eyes that looked like tired flint. Robert, Ryan's father, the retired federal judge, the patriarch who had built the family dynasty that Ryan was currently using as a shield. "Get in," he said. His voice was gravel, worn smooth by decades of passing sentences. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Robert," I said, staying in the shadows. "Your son made his position clear." "My son is a fool," Robert said. He didn't look at me. He looked straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles were white. "And his brother is a liability." He extended a hand out the window. He was holding a small, silver thumb drive. "I was at the house," he said. "The crisis meeting. They thought I was there to offer legal advice. They thought the old man was just there to sign the checks and clean up the mess like I always do." I stepped closer, wary. "And weren't you?" "There is a line, Jordan," he said, finally looking at me. "I have buried a lot of skeletons for this family. DUIs, gambling debts, mistresses. But a child? My granddaughter?" His jaw tightened. "That is not a mess. That is a sin." I took the drive. It felt heavy, cold metal against my skin. "What is this?" "They forgot that before I was a judge, I was a prosecutor," Robert said quietly. "And I never walk into a room without insurance." I plugged the drive into my secure comms unit. An audio file popped up, time-stamped 1 hour ago. I pressed play. The sound of crystal glasses clinking. Ryan's voice, shaky but arrogant. "If the bruises don't fade by the election, we can't put her on stage. We say she's traumatized, mentally unstable. We say she did it to herself." Then, Brandon's voice, deeper, smoother. "I've already handled the intake logs. Dr. Evans owes me. But the security footage is a problem. It'll cost 50 grand to wipe the server. Ryan, pay it. Pull it from the campaign fund. Just label it as consulting fees." I stopped the recording. The silence in the garage was absolute. My heart rate didn't spike. It dropped. A cold, deadly calm washed over me. This wasn't just proof of bad parenting. This wasn't just moral bankruptcy. "Wire fraud," I said, listing the charges in my head. "Tampering with evidence. Bribery of a public official. Conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice." I looked at Robert. "This is a federal indictment." "I know," Robert said. He looked older now, the weight of the betrayal crushing him. "I can't stop what's coming, Jordan, but I can make sure you don't miss." He rolled up the window. "Burn them down." The car drove away, leaving me alone in the dark. But I wasn't holding a grievance anymore. I was holding the smoking gun, and the safety was off. The next morning, the sun rose over Chicago with a blinding, indifferent brightness. By 9 a.m., the steps of Mercy General looked less like a hospital entrance and more like a stage set. Microphones were clustered on a podium. Satellite trucks idled at the curb. Ryan had assembled the press corps to control the narrative before it could control him. I watched from the tint of a black SUV parked across the street. Beside me sat Marshall Davies, a man who didn't care about local politics or Senate races. He only cared about Title 18 of the U.S. Code. "Green light," Davies said, adjusting his earpiece. "We move on your mark." I watched Ryan step up to the podium. He looked impeccable. The grieving father, exhausted but standing tall for his family. Ashley stood a step behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a tissue she hadn't used. Brandon, the district attorney, stood off to the side, radiating the arrogant confidence of a man who thinks he owns the law. Ryan tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice dropping an octave to hit that perfect note of somber gravity. "As many of you know, our daughter, Mia, was involved in a tragic accident yesterday. We are devastated. But we are a family of faith. We ask for privacy as we navigate this difficult time, and we ask that you respect." "Mark," I said. I opened the door and stepped out. I wasn't wearing my tactical gear anymore. I was wearing a sharp, black blazer over a white shirt. Clean, professional, lethal. I walked across the street. I didn't run. I walked with the cadence of an incoming tide. Behind me, 4 federal marshals and 2 military police officers fell into formation. The visual shift in the crowd was instantaneous. The reporters turned. The cameras swung away from the podium and focused on the phalanx moving toward the steps. Ryan saw me. His eyes widened, confusion flickering behind his polished mask. He leaned into the mic. "Please, my ex-wife is. She's very distraught. We need security to stand down." Marshal Davies barked, his voice carrying without a microphone. He flashed his badge. It wasn't the local PD badge Brandon could make disappear. It was the gold star of the United States Marshals Service. Ryan froze. Brandon took a step forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Now, wait a minute. This is a private press conference. You have no jurisdiction here. I didn't stop walking until I was standing next to Ryan. I looked at him. He looked small. I didn't bring a statement, I said, my voice calm enough to be picked up by the hot mic. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it to the bundle of microphones. I pressed play. The audio from the garage blasted across the hospital plaza, amplified by a dozen speakers. If the bruises don't fade by the election, we can't put her on stage. We say she's traumatized. Mentally unstable, the crowd gasped. The shutter clicks exploded like automatic fire. I've already handled the intake logs. It'll cost $50,000 to wipe the server. Pay it. Pull it from the campaign fund. Ryan's face drained of color. He looked like a man watching his own execution in real time. He lunged for the microphone, trying to cut the feed, but Davies caught his wrist mid-air. Ryan Evans, Davies announced, his voice booming over the chaos. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and federal witness tampering. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut cut through the noise. It was a mechanical, final sound, the click of a steel trap. Brandon tried to back away, reaching for his phone, but 2 MPs blocked his path. You can't do this. I'm the district attorney. Not anymore, I said softly. I looked for Ashley. She wasn't behind the podium. She was trying to slip through the revolving doors back into the hospital, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. A female officer intercepted her, spinning her around and cuffing her against the glass. Her sunglasses fell off, revealing eyes wide with panic. The untouchable family was dismantled in 120 seconds. Ryan was shoved toward the waiting SUV, his head pushed down by the marshal. As he passed me, he looked up. There was no arrogance left, only shock. Jordan, he choked out. Why? I looked at him, then at the cameras that were broadcasting his ruin to the world. You broke the contract, I said. I turned my back on him and walked toward the hospital entrance. I didn't look back at the flashing lights. I didn't answer the reporters shouting my name. The audit was complete. The account was closed. The chaos outside was just a vibration in the glass now. The sirens, the shouting reporters, the crumbling of a political dynasty, it was all muffled by the heavy, soundproof windows of the 4th floor. I walked back into room 412. The security detail was gone. The tension was gone. The air finally smelled like oxygen again, not fear. Mia was awake. She was sitting up, holding the stuffed rabbit I had sent her from Germany. When she saw me, she didn't ask where I had been. She didn't ask about the noise outside. She just reached out a small hand, her wrist wrapped in fresh gauze. I took it. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. In my line of work, apologies are for mistakes, and I hadn't made a mistake. I had made a correction. I sat in the chair beside the bed and pulled out my secure phone one last time. I opened the target package folder. The audio files, the photos of the bruises, the blockchain ledger, the financial records of Ryan's campaign fraud. I selected all. I hit delete. The screen flashed, data erased. The weapon was disassembled. The war was over. Then, a second notification slid onto the screen. Wire transfer complete. I looked at the number. It was the entirety of the joint assets Ryan and I had held. The house equity, the campaign accounts, the savings. I had liquidated everything 5 minutes before the freeze order from the Department of Justice hit the banks. It wasn't theft. It was a repatriation of funds. Every cent was now sitting in an irrevocable trust in Mia's name. Ryan wouldn't just go to prison. He would go to prison broke. I slipped the phone into my pocket. It was just a piece of glass and metal now. I looked down at my feet. I was still wearing my combat boots, dusty, scuffed, laced tight for a rapid extraction that never happened. I reached down and unlaced them, one by one. I pulled them off and set them by the door. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't a ghost funding a life I wasn't allowed to live. I curled my legs up onto the chair and leaned my head against the mattress, listening to the steady, rhythmic beep of the monitor. It was the only sound in the world that mattered. Justice isn't always loud. It isn't always a gavel banging or a siren wailing. Sometimes justice is just prepared. And sometimes the only way to truly protect the things you love is to remind the world why they should be afraid of the dark. Share this story if you believe truth is the only weapon that matters.